Good Friday morning, and welcome to this week's episode of Finding God in the Dark. My name is Don Stevens, and I serve Asbury United Methodist Church in Woodstown and St. John's UMC in Harrisonville, New Jersey.
And I'm Pastor Jonathan Campbell. I'm the pastor at Lacey United Methodist Church in Forked River.
This week, we are talking about the 2007 remake
Yeah.
of a 1957 film called 3:10 to Yuma. It was directed by James Mangold, based on a short story by Elmore Leonard, which I haven't read any of his stuff, but I'm familiar that he is a very popular Western author.
Yeah.
Um, it stars primarily these two guys,
Yeah.
Christian Bale and Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
And let's see, it didn't. It was nominated for a couple of, kind of lower end Academy Awards, original score, sound mixing, stuff like that. The basic story is that Russell Crowe is a bad guy, leads a gang of what, stagecoach robbers, I guess.
Well, they rip off trains actually.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's right, trains and yeah.
yeah.
And Christian Bale is a rancher who gets tied up in one of these, caught up in one of these robberies, and then takes on the responsibility of trying to get, when um, Crow's
So,
character is captured, trying to get him to the train to take him to justice.
yeah.
Um, I have seen a little bit of this film before, so it wasn't completely unfamiliar.
Yeah.
But I guess when I saw it previously, I really didn't pick up on as much of the biblical scriptural
Yeah.
references that are in it.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot. I mean, Russell,
Yeah.
for as much, what's his name, Ben,
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
he quotes scripture all the time. His
Yeah.
pistols, he calls his pistol the hand of God, and it has a crucifix on the handle.
Yeah.
Um, so he's a very sort of a mixed character.
Yeah.
Dan, our hero, so to
Yeah.
speak, also kind of a mixed character. He's not particularly, in how he deals with his wife and his kids initially, not particularly a likable guy.
Yeah.
Um, but in the end becomes sort of this reluctant hero. He definitely has a great story arc here.
Yes.
Um,
They actually both do.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, in reality, the way that, well, this is what? This 17-year-old movie. So
Yeah.
here's your spoiler alert. We're going to talk about what happens in the movie. If you haven't seen
Yeah.
it before, you
Go
should
see it. Yeah. Yeah.
have. But um, he ends up and again, in a strictly in a sense of being self-sacrificial.
Mm.
Dan ends up being sort of a Christ figure
Yeah.
in doing what needed to be done and what had to be done to protect and preserve his family,
Yeah.
um, even in the face of, well, what eventually is his death. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, a great kind of Christian model, but he's really not the best guy. So
Yeah.
he's
No.
a very
Mixed
he's a
bag.
very human character, right?
Well, and that's to me, that's I this is one of those movies that like I watched and if someone were to ask me like tell me about the movie, I don't know if I could have told them much about the movie other than I liked it. It's one of those movies you watch and you're like, I had a positive experience, but
Mhm.
you don't necessarily go back to. And so it was interesting watching it last night, going back to it again, and recognizing how James Mangold uh, is the director,
Right.
and it's interesting. He's a director I wouldn't have named as like my top 10 director list, but when I pulled up all the movies he's made, I'm like, oh, he's made a lot of great movies that I
I
like.
like that one. I like that one.
Um, but I thought it was fascinating what they did, and I would be interested to read the Elmore Leonard short story to see if it's in here too. But I don't know. I felt like this movie does a really interesting job of you have these people on this journey, but throughout the journey, you get exposed to kind of the evil of the world around them. And you're thinking about the good and bad about these two main characters, but you're also thinking about the good and bad that's all around them that isn't being dealt with.
Yeah.
So like Ben is the bad guy, obviously, because he robs stagecoaches and he kills people and he does things that are bad.
Yeah.
But
Kills
you
one of his own men just for putting the rest of them in danger.
yeah. Um you also have this the Dan character, the kind of the reluctant hero of the novel or the of the movie. And but he's throughout the story, you see with him and you see on this journey the corrupt society that's around him that no one is dealing with. So like for example, Ben owes money on his land, and the guy that he owes money to has at the beginning of the movie sends thugs to burn down
His
his
barn.
barn
Yeah.
and to basically threaten him that if he doesn't pay in a couple days, they're going to burn down everything and they're going to run him off the land.
Right.
And that's evil and that's wrong and that shouldn't be happening, but that's not addressed. It's kind of in the world we're in, it's kind of like, well, that's just life. This evil is just life. And then on their journey they run into the railroad, of course, is a major theme in this. And at one point, they run into these Chinese immigrants that are being taken advantage of and being horribly treated to build the railroad. And yet, there's no kind of conversation about this is evil and, and this is bad and this shouldn't be happening.
Right.
And so it's just kind of interesting that we focus on the evil of Ben, but the rest of the world around them isn't being critical of the evil that they're participating in at all.
Well, and I think there's a very real case to be made for almost every character in this film
Mhm.
is a very mixed character, right?
Yeah.
There really isn't any pure-hearted character. Even the kids, even
Yeah.
Dan's children are
Yeah.
like in one of the earliest scenes in the film, his older son is telling Dan, you should just go into town and kill this train guy. The
Yeah.
guy that had your barn burned down. Just go kill
Yeah.
him. And then the younger son says, yeah, do what my brother said. You know?
Yeah.
So like every character is their good and bad sides are on display.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe the only close to pure character in the film is the wife,
Yeah.
maybe.
Maybe.
You know,
But she's in there so little that you don't really,
yeah, she's
it
really just in the first 20 minutes of the film, you know.
she's the wife. That's you kind of need that setup, right? And
Exactly.
you can tell men wrote this story because it's
Well,
like it's driven
but
by men.
she's in a real sense though, she is Dan's motivation,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
You find out like one of the reasons like he didn't want to move to Arizona
Yeah.
to become a rancher. They moved to Arizona because his son was sick and needed the dry climate,
Yeah.
you know? So
And yeah.
everything he has done is really for his wife and his children.
Well, and what's interesting, I don't know, what I think is really fascinating about this film is we it forces you to recognize that we oftentimes will focus on one evil in life and ignore the others.
Hmm.
And like we'll focus on train robbery is bad, which it is, and killing is bad, which it is,
Sure.
but how the Chinese immigrants are treated is bad and wrong, and how the powerful landowner that has money in a society and uses that money to intimidate and to force people to do what they want to do. That's wrong too. And yet we tend to not look at all of this evil. We focus on one evil. And that becomes the central focus of what's bad in the world. And to me, that's an important lesson that we often lose sight of is how are we complicit in evil that really shapes our world and what's the kind of evil around us that we're ignoring, you
Yeah.
know?
I'll tell you, I find it interesting that there's almost a sense, and I don't know if this is the director or the screenwriter or whatever it is, but there's almost a sense that they almost turn Christian faith upside down here,
Mhm.
in that, the guy that you're not supposed to, if you go with these very black and white issues, right?
Yeah.
This very good guy, bad guy thing.
Yeah.
The bad guy, this guy, um, is the one quoting scripture. He's the one with the Christian symbolism on his
Yeah.
guns.
Mhm.
The good guy never read the Bible, doesn't
Yeah.
quote scripture. Even the bounty hunter, I think Peter Fonda plays a bounty
Yeah.
hunter in this
Mhm.
film. You know, he asked him, well, is the Bible the only book you ever read? Yup. That, like,
Yeah.
but he's just a bounty hunter. He just arrests people for money,
Yeah.
or
And
kills people for money.
yeah. And what's interesting too is in the world we're in, and I think even in the Wild West, a lot of people looked up to Pinkerton folks because they usually had a lot of money. These were people that were hired to be either detectives or to hunt people down,
Right.
and they were paid a lot of money to do that, and they went all over the West doing it. And they were oftentimes viewed as the hero. But what this movie does is point out that they also did horrible things, and they often kind of acted lawlessly. They did whatever they wanted to do or whatever they needed to do to get their paycheck.
Yeah.
And again, it's this idea of corruption being all around us, and we choose to ignore the stuff we want to valorize, and we focus on the stuff we want to focus on. And I think I'm guessing that's a critique that Leonard wrote into that to the piece. He wanted people to think about um, the idea, and even we dress them, the the Dan character is in light colored clothing, right? And the Ben character is always in dark clothing.
Right.
It sets up in those traditional Moffats of the white hat, black hat kind of thing.
Right.
And yet we continually have these people that are mixed, and I think that's probably the point of both the short story and the movie is what is good and what is bad, and why do we assume that people, even if they're doing something good, are completely good, and even if people are doing something that's bad, that they're completely bad? Why do we do these binary choices instead of recognizing that it's more complicated?
Oh, well, I can answer that.
Yeah.
The answer to that is it's easier.
Yes, absolutely.
It's easier to and look, this is something we've been talking about
Yeah.
outside of the podcast,
Yeah.
is how much easier it is to just paint everyone who disagrees with me or everyone who thinks differently than me with very broad brush and
Right.
just
Yeah.
say, I'm right, and you're not just wrong, you're evil.
Yeah. You're
You
bad.
know, I'm the good guy and you're the bad guy, and that's the bottom line, and there's no other discussion
Right.
because that's easier to do.
Yeah.
It's than to um step into that unfamiliar territory and
Yeah.
have, as we've talked about again offline, have the relationship, have the discussion,
Yeah.
and that's where I think you see those discussions happen in this film, and you become, I mean, Ben
Yeah.
by the end of the film becomes kind of a sympathetic character.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, you want to see him go to jail, but you don't want to see him die,
Yeah.
you know?
And you definitely, I mean, how the movie ends is him choosing to go to jail. Granted, it's made very clear that he's escaped from this prison. He'll probably escape again. I mean, it's very
Right.
clear that he's going to escape, but he's choosing to go to jail to benefit Dan and his family. Like
Right.
he makes that choice even after Dan dies. He still goes through with making
Still
that
gets on the
choice
train.
so that Dan's family will benefit from the deal Dan made with the railroad.
Yep.
Um, and I don't know. I was to since we talked this stuff out through theology, right? I want to throw something at you.
Sure.
Okay, so just quickly for the folks that are watching, there is um, a doctrine in Christianity called atonement, which is at one-ment. That's
Right.
literally what the word means. It's an English
Right.
word that was created to talk about this. So it means at one-ment. And it means how does Jesus save us? That's basically what it means.
Hmm.
And in atonement, there are many different theories of how Jesus saves us. And luckily, I think wisely, the church has never said this is the one you have to believe. And so I think that's wise. One of the theories populated by a guy named Peter Abelard was moral atonement theory, which is basically the idea that how Jesus saves us is he models for us the way to be human. He models a better way of being in community and as an individual, and that's how he saves us. And what I thought was interesting was a lot of that's going on with Dan and that character. He wants to ultimately, it turns out he doesn't need to do anything to get the money he wanted to get. He can literally get the $200 and just walk away. And he decides to go through with taking Ben to the station because he wants to model a different way of being to his son. He
Yeah.
wants to model a better way of being a human being to his
Yeah.
son. And that's really the choice. He makes this beautiful statement where he goes, "You know what I realized? I realized the government gave me basically $200 for losing my leg during the Civil War."
Right.
And he says, "I realized it wasn't because they wanted to do right by me. It was because they wanted to give me $200 so they could walk away."
Yeah, he said what he said was that he said I used to think that they gave me $200 so I could walk away.
Yeah,
But what I realized is they gave me $200 so they could walk
they
away.
could walk away. And
Yeah.
he wants to model to his son, you don't walk away from your responsibilities. You
Yeah.
don't walk away from helping people.
Yeah.
You know,
And the context of that is that they're basically in what seems like an unescapable position, right?
yeah,
The gang has recruited the whole town
yeah,
to take them out. They'll pay anybody $200 or whatever to take them out. And
yeah,
the Pinkertons have abandoned them. The sheriff's walked away. Everybody's walked away. It's just Dan and Ben, and
mm,
he's got to try and get through this town to the train station with
yeah,
just him and Ben. And
yeah,
Ben ain't on his side.
yeah.
At least at this point, it doesn't seem like. And Ben is the one that offers him. He said, "I'll give you the $200 if you walk away right now." He said, "I'll
He
give
even
you
says,
a
"I'll give
thousand
a
dollars,
$1,000." Yeah,
yeah, if you walk away right now." And
and yeah,
for the moral, and that's the word, the moral principle of it.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
no, I'm going to do what I said I would do.
And you get in this lovely story when actually you get it after he leaves his son in a adjacent hotel room with the railroad guy,
Hmm.
and the railroad guy promises that if he gets Ben on the to the train, that he'll give his family $1,000 and he'll make sure his son is safe and gets back home.
Right.
And
And,
so
and get the rights to their land and the water
yeah,
rights and all of
and
that.
get the
Yeah.
water rights and everything. And,
Yeah.
basically sets them up to have a future. I mean,
Right.
basically is what's going on. And on their way, Ben kind of overpowers Dan, and Dan tells the story of how he lost his leg. And he said, "I
Right.
lost my leg because we were defending Washington D.C., but we were retreating, and one of my soldiers shot me in the leg." And he goes, try telling that story to your son."
Yeah.
And what you realize is throughout the beginning of the movie, there's real tension between Dan and his oldest son. And you realize that he told him the story and then his son was ashamed of it. And so Dan wants to give his son a different model of what his father was because he thinks that giving him that better model of what his father was will make him a better man. Like that's all kind of shown in the movie.
Yeah, which I mean, as it works out, the son doesn't leave.
Yeah,
Like he ends up staying and seeing his father,
yeah, yeah,
get Ben on the train,
yeah,
and so he actually does accomplish that,
yeah,
setting that moral standard, that new role
yeah.
model, son.
And again, that's part of, I don't think, what I always tell people is I don't think there's one atonement theory that explains everything. I think the many layers of different atonement theories are supposed to be kind of held together because they all help us better understand what God was doing in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But one of the things that God is doing, I think, in Jesus Christ is helping us see what human beings could be and helping us see what it means to live a better life and to give a better example and to shape a better community. And you see that in this movie. Dan believes if he can model a brave, heroic father figure to his son will ultimately be a better man.
Right.
And I think there's some deep truth in that idea for all of us is our choices of modeling better behaviors have an impact on other people and make them better. And again, this movie is really about in a lot of ways is about fathers and sons, right?
Hmm.
If you want to, you can say parents and children because because Ben also tells this powerful story about how his mother abandoned him. Why he knows so much scripture was his mom set him at a train station and said, "I'll be back. You read the Bible." And he spent 3 days waiting for her reading the Bible.
Right.
And so in a weird way, Ben wants to give Dan's oldest son this better example of a parent because he never had a good example for being a parent. So it's almost like Ben kind of sees and believes that Dan giving this better model of a human being to his son will actually make his son a better human being. Like
Right.
he seems to buy into that idea.
Yeah, that's that growth arc
Yeah,
for
for Ben.
Ben, right?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, now, on the other side, like I said, there's almost a sense that like there's even the guys that know Christianity best seem to be the worst guys. The
yeah.
guys that know the faith best seem to be the worst guys, which in a sense you could almost say like, does the director or the writer just kind of hate Christians? Are Christians the problem? I'm not saying that, but you could ask the question.
Well, I definitely, well, granted, probably because I'm biased, I'm a pastor. Um,
No, you
Obviously,
don't say.
you don't say really, but I would definitely say that there is a critique of um, the kind of the folks that go around um, kind of spot quoting scripture, you know, dropping in a line of scripture, going,
Okay.
you know, this, and yet not knowing the full context of scripture, right? Because Ben does that all the time. He quotes Proverbs a couple times,
Hmm.
and he just quotes one line, and in the context, you're like, okay, yeah, that fits if you just read that one passage. But the Bible isn't just that one passage, that one line.
Right.
It's a lot more, and you're missing the larger context. And so, we all have had experienced people in our lives that throw scripture at people. Just like like this verse will settle the argument, and they just like bam, and they use scripture as a weapon, and that's
Mhm.
really what you know Ben is picking and choosing the scriptures that validate his life or validate what he wants to do without setting with the totality of scripture, right? And recognizing that what I tell people all the time is don't quote me a passage, show me a theme, and then we'll have a
Mm.
conversation about the theme of scripture.
Yeah,
And
I had a friend who would, I'm sure he still says it. I haven't talked to him in a while, but a friend who used to say, text without context is
yeah,
pretext.
yeah,
That very idea. And what the way I've often put it is you can make scripture say anything you want it to say, right? If you take it out of its context, you can twist it into a pretzel knot and make it say whatever you want.
yeah.
Is that the real, the genuine intention of the passage?
Yeah, and I think we most Christians don't spend the time to recognize that all people that read scripture read it through a lens. They read it through a lens that they have chosen to read it through.
No,
And
mine's right though.
yeah, of course. Right. But what I tell people all the time is learn what your lens is
Yeah.
and be honest about to yourself and to others what the lens is you're using. And then also be willing to critique that lens. Is that the best lens through which I need to read scripture? Because scripture is written over more than 1,000 years. It's written by many different authors. And to make it make sense, you have to use a lens. We all have to use a lens. Basically, a way on which I'm going to prioritize these passages. I'm going to put them in kind of a power ranking. Oh, we all do that.
Yeah.
And what I just encourage people to do is be honest about it. What's your lens? What's the lens you're going to slide over these passages? And for me, I always try to do the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. So
Right.
for me, the Gospels take priority. So I'll always slide the Gospels over whatever else I'm reading, and I'll say, okay, how do what I learn about Jesus? How does that affect what I'm reading in the Old Testament right now, or what I'm reading in Paul's letters even right now. And but you got to be honest about that. And unfortunately, too many Christians aren't honest about the fact that we all need a lens through which we read Scripture.
Yeah. Fair. Absolutely fair. I think that and what I was thinking of as you were saying that was I was remembering my one of my New Testament classes from seminary, which was taught by Craig Keener.
Yeah,
Um, Keener used to tell us that if you want to understand particularly New Testament, Old
yeah,
Testament is a little tougher, but New Testament particularly,
yeah,
you must know the context, the cultural context
yeah,
to which the author was writing. So if they're writing to Corinth, what is going on in Corinth at the
yeah,
time that letter is written?
yeah,
Then you will understand what they're writing about. If you just read it on a surface level and try to interpret it based on your current context,
mm,
you're going to miss
yes,
every time. You're going to miss.
yeah,
And that's like I've carried that for a long time. I graduated from seminary 20 years ago. So I've been dragging that around, just going like, okay, so what is it? What did it mean to the Ephesian church? What did it mean to the Philippian church?
cool.
Before I start asking what it means now.
Well, it's the problem of being humble when it comes to the Bible, right? And recognizing that it wasn't written for you.
Right.
It was written for a group of people long ago, and you can learn from it, and you should learn from it, and it can speak to your situation. But it's only going to do all those things if you're humble enough to recognize it was written to someone else first. And it's important to me to understand who that first group of people were.
Right. Right. Um. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. So we're uh a little distracted here. We're getting close to time. I wanted
Yeah,
to turn our attention towards what we're doing next week, but um overall, we'll be clear about this film. Okay,
yeah,
it's rated R.
yeah.
There's quite a lot of particularly gun violence,
Violence and yeah,
language,
yeah,
etc. It's a Western.
yes,
So,
definitely.
what
Yep,
pretty much know what you're getting into.
yep.
But if you're in it for these themes of morality and decent character arc, and I think it's well acted by these two as
Oh,
well,
absolutely.
um, then worth your time. Absolutely.
Mhm.
That said, what would we like to look at for next week?
Well, it's your turn. So,
It is. Now I don't let's see. I'm glancing at Netflix, see what's on
yeah.
Netflix right now.
Oh, then do you want to go with the really popular one this week?
What's popular on Netflix this week?
Something Ridge.
Uh
Um, Let me look it
oh,
up for you.
what did I say that was? Binge read today's top.
Um,
Rebel
Rebel
Ridge.
Ridge. Rebel Ridge.
Rebel Ridge is a 2024 one in movies today. Small town cops think Terry is an easy target when they seize the former Marine's life savings. They have no idea how far he's willing to go for justice. All right, that sounds cool. I'll watch
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
I'm
so
going to see it, so I'm like, oh, kill
good.
two birds with one
Yeah,
stone.
well, at some point, I think we should probably, pick a film that's still in theaters.
Yeah.
Like maybe one
Well,
that's
I
coming
I
out this week
definitely
or something.
yes, we've talked about the fact that during the Oscar season, we'll try to do more movies that are up for nominations. So,
Yeah, yeah, good idea. So then this week we'll watch the Netflix film Rebel Ridge.
yeah.
Um, any other thoughts on 310 to Yuma?
I definitely feel like it's a great example of the fact that you can watch movies in layers. So if you just want a good shoot 'em up cowboy Western movie, this
It
will
does
complete
that.
it.
Yep.
But if you want to think about deeper things like fathers and sons or kind of the good and bad in all of us, those elements are definitely there too.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good recommendation. And friends, for next week, again, Rebel Ridge on Netflix. If you'd like to watch along, follow along, we appreciate it. And till then, keep on finding God in the dark. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast. If you're enjoying these discussions, please consider hitting the like button down below or subscribing to follow along. We put out weekly episodes on Friday mornings, and we are so glad that you're finding this discussion of theology and film entertaining enough to follow along with us. Take care and God bless, friends.